Kia ora, welcome to WomenPower. Thanks for all your feedback on last week's first episode. Please go to our Facebook page and let us know your ideas for improving the position of women in New Zealand. We want action to come from these programs rather than just talk. This week we're looking at being a feminist mother. How can feminists bring up their children in a patriarchal society which devalues and discriminates against women? We'll also look at why only 1 in 100 rapists is convicted. Why does our legal system give so much protection to perpetrators and so little support to victims of sexual offending? But first, being a mum is hard enough, but feminist mothers face even more challenges, swimming against the tide of our macho society which values men above women and places material possessions above helping others. To talk more about this, I'm joined by two feminist mothers, Cissy Rock and Nicola Whyte. Kia ora, Cissy, welcome to the program.
Hi, greetings.
And kia ora, Nicola, welcome to you.
Hi, Katrina.
You're a feminist mum to a girl, I understand.
Yes, I've got Hannah who's 8.
And what are the challenges of being a feminist mum to a girl?
There's many. Most of them are about recognising the messages we give girls at a young age and how they might play out as she grows older. Things like that when little boys like girls, that we say that, you know, they're being mean to you, that means they like you. And I really feel strongly that we shouldn't be encouraging the acceptance of violent or mean behaviour in terms of affection. I think body shaming, we get the message fairly early on, as evidenced by some comments my daughter has made that that we should be a certain size and that it's desirable to be thin. And I think that we encourage little girls to try and take on adulthood very early on, but also simultaneously we worry too much about how them trying things out, them trying to be adults. So I think that's a natural part of being a kid, but it's navigating between the sexualisation of young girls and them attempting some adult things, and it's trying to get through that path in a balanced way. It's really challenging. Yeah.
And Cissy, you're a lesbian feminist mum to 3 boys, I understand.
Yep, I have 3 boys, 20, 16 and 13.
And how is it being a lesbian feminist mum to boys?
I think it's hard being a single mum to boys, because I think that they're really lacking kind of role models about how to be men in the world. I think it's hard for them, me being a lesbian, because, you know, there's a little bit of a stigma by association and a little bit of maybe concern, you know, like, do we not like men? Are we anti-men? You know, did I really want girls? Which secretly I did want a girl, which is why I've got 3 boys. And really hard to sit there and watch a lot of television programs and to feel like you're constantly having to readdress messages, and it gets a little bit boring after a while. I think that, you know, it's a bit sort of naggy to sort of keep saying, oh, you know, why do you think she's portrayed like this, and what does this really mean? Yeah, but it does work. I mean, my 13-year-old said to me the other day, oh, Mum, sexist. So there is some awareness of it. Whether they enact that or not, I'm not sure.
And I suppose with girls, how do you combat the pink princess and this idea that for girls the most important thing in their life should be a relationship and, you know, having the fairy tale wedding?
It's pretty hard. I have tried to find feminist literature for Hannah to read, and alternatively I'll rewrite the endings of fairy tales quite often. So, you know, there'll suddenly be some bypassing of pages in a book, and all of a sudden the princess has actually ditched the prince because he was a bit of a douche. But yeah, it is challenging to try and offer that diversity, like Cissy just said. It's trying to ask those questions, and you know, when you're playing dolls, saying, well, actually that princess might like that other princess and not like that prince at all. And they absorb those messages from such an early age that you just have to keep asking questions and keep providing alternatives and pointing out people you know who are living different lifestyles and in different ways, and championing their great qualities and making sure that it's not just, you know, being pretty that is the be-all and end-all of life, that actually it's about hard work and trying, you know, making an effort, that the better things to be aiming for.
We have a really macho culture in New Zealand for boys. How do you bring up boys, you know, not to think that they have to be macho and they have to kind of put down women as part of being a real man and they have to play rugby? It's very, very hard in our culture. Boys that don't want to play rugby, that are interested in ballet or are gentle. How do you deal with that as a parent?
I think that feminism is like a whole lot of principles around how we are in the world. So it's about being cooperative and sharing and inclusive and developing empathy. You know, it's about listening to other people. So I think if you're kind of enacting those principles in your everyday life with your friends that come around, then your children are developing those kind of functionings without them being under a feminist banner. So they're not saying, oh, my mum's a feminist and she's taught me to be sympathetic to the homeless people, but they'll come home and say, oh, gee, Mum, I saw a whole lot of young homeless people. Oh, the stories they told me just shocked me. You know, so that they're sort of developing skills by seeing what it's like to be a member of a community. That's what I say to my kids. We're a community in this house and we've got to do things that work for each other. Now, none of them are very macho. None of them play sport. I don't play sport. I mean, I think I tried with my oldest one. He did a little bit of ice skating for a while. You know, I tried to get him involved in lots of different things. But I think that there is another grouping of young guys out there that are into their gaming or ones that are really into... There seems to be more acceptance from what I can see. And we live in West Auckland, so we are kind of at the extreme of being able to be a little bit different. Yeah, but you don't have to, you can fit into different kind of grooves.
We've got a huge domestic violence problem in New Zealand, and obviously women are bearing the brunt of nearly all of it. How can you bring up girls to try and protect them from that, or to keep them safe, or to recognise the warning signs of a violent relationship and get out?
I think if we had the answer, we might be able to be on top of the problem a bit more. And I'm certainly, no expert in the field of violence against women, but trying to teach my daughter to be open about her communication with me and her family members, to make sure that she's got a really strong base of self-esteem, so she doesn't need to feel validation by someone who's controlling her, and to be able to recognise the warning signs of like financial control or jealous behaviour when that tips over into something more unhealthy, and just keeping things open for her to come and ask me questions, and being supportive of her choices. And I think it's also a huge issue around consent. We need to be encouraging women to not be doing things that they don't want to do, from a really young age, like, kissing sort of that elderly aunt that wants to come and pinch her cheeks. So I think it's right from the start, we've got to teach people about respecting their own boundaries, or respecting other people's boundaries. So I don't, try not to make Hannah do anything she doesn't want to do if she's got a really good reason. And when I do want her to do something, I try and explain the reasoning behind that so that she understands it and isn't just taking someone's instructions for, verbatim or without questioning them, which is, I think, all these things work together to create a system where women are abused.
How do you deal with those issues as a mum of boys?
Gee, have the hard conversations. I think. Role model. Like, I'm like every other mum. I yell at my kids and then I have to go and say, God, I wish I hadn't yelled at you. That was about me being frustrated. I wish I'd done this differently. Encourage them to do the same. I think it's really tough because there's a lot of messages about boys not crying, boys not having emotions, and sometimes my kids say to me, Mum, we're boys, we don't want to talk about our feelings all the time. But I guess that if that's there as an option, that they get it, that people do have feelings, and I try and have conversations about, how do you know if you like someone, and it's okay if you like a boy or a girl, and but I think that they know the bigger picture out there about how they're meant to behave, and I think the pressure sometimes is really tough and really gets to them because all of us want to be accepted in our own social circles, and so the messages that are given to us about what is acceptable, no matter even if at home you're right on PC family, you get out there, you're in the real world, you've got the messages, you're probably most likely to work in a way that kind of protects you from being teased or discriminated against.
Thanks, Cissy, and thanks, Nicola. Now let's look at our WomenPower fails and wins for this week. WomenPower fail. A Spanish judge has ruled that a driving school was right to charge female clients more than men because men are better drivers. Judge Javier Alba was ruling on whether the driving school discriminated by offering cheaper lessons to men than to women. Spain's Women's Institute plans to petition for the matter to be taken to the Constitutional Court. The WomenPower win goes to the wonderful Indian woman who made an amazing video satirising rape. It's called It's My Fault, and it's gone viral in India and around the world. Here it is now.
Ladies, do you think rape is something men do out of a desire for control, empowered by years of patriarchy? You've clearly been misled by the notion that women are people too. Because let's face it, ladies, rape, it's your fault. It all begins with what you wear. Scientific studies suggest that women who wear skirts are the leading cause of rape. Do you know why? Because men have eyes. In fact, here are some examples of provocative clothing that could cause rape.
Notice the one thing they all had in common? That's right, all women. No women, no rape. Now some people might actually argue that the crime is committed by men. And to these people I say, who gives birth to these men? Right again, it's us. It's my fault.
Indian culture provides for several progressive methods to counter rape. For example, the godmen prescribed Bhaiya technique, wherein you just refer to your attacker as Bhaiya and voila, rape cancelled. Now, ladies, this works every time.
Another way women shamelessly propagate rape is by working late into the night. Ladies, why work late and be independent? In fact, why work at all? That's what husbands are for. Fun fact, if he's your husband, it's not rape.
Powerful people have been spreading rumors that things apart from you can cause rape. For example, chow mein. Chow mein is made in the kitchen. And who's in the kitchen?
Movies. And who titillates men on screen?
And cell phones. Cell phones are made for talking. And who talks a lot?
In fact, to elucidate further, here is a pie chart. As you can see, women are the leading cause of 100% of all sexual assaults. Oh, I'm sorry, the math is wrong. Clearly this pie chart was made by a woman.
Now before we go, let's not forget, if you're tired of being humiliated by rape, you can always go to the cops and be humiliated by them instead.
Madam, when rape was happened, were you with boys?
No, not...
Why you went out without boys' protection?
Well, actually, there were a couple of my friends there.
See, you are with boys at night. What will happen? So, what did we learn today?
It's my fault? Thank you, officer, thank you. And lastly, ladies, stop seducing juveniles into raping you. They get let off easy, and that just makes you a statutory rapist.
And whose fault is that?
It's your fault.
It's my 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 fault.
It's your fault.
For centuries, women who are sexually assaulted have been blamed for the being out at night, wearing skirts, and many other ridiculous reasons. But actually, our own homes are one of the most dangerous places, and most women know they're rapists. Only 1 in 100 rapists is convicted. This is because only 7 out of 100 sexual assaults against adults are reported to the police. Only 3 of those are prosecuted, and only one will achieve a conviction. To talk more about this, I'm joined by Dr. Kim McGregor, Executive Director of Rape Prevention Education Whakau Mauri, and Sans Pepe from Te Hoaki a Hone National Network Ending Sexual Violence Together. Kia ora, Sans. Welcome to the program.
Kia ora, Katrina. Nā mihi nui ki a koe. Nō Sans Pepe ahau, nō tūhoi. Ko tamakai moana te hapu. Ko maunga pohatu te maunga. Ko tūhoi te iwi.
Kia ora. And kia ora, Kim. Welcome to the program.
Kia ora, Katrina. Kim McGregor. I'm from Te Hoaki a Hine National Network Ending Sexual Violence Together. I'm the Tauiwi Chair.
Why don't more women report rapes to the police?
There are a number of reasons. One of the biggest is that the people who experience sexual violence are often known, they know the perpetrator, and quite often care about the perpetrator, so don't report. They also will often blame themselves, especially if there's been alcohol involved or if they have had a previous relationship with the person. So there's a lot of self-blame involved. Then if they're children, again, they often blame themselves, feel that they caused the sexual violence to occur. And so there's only about 10% of sexual assaults reported to the police. And so when the police receive a report of sexual assault, it's very important that the police can engage with that person and support them through the complaint process, knowing that there's likely to be some post-traumatic stress, because rape and sexual violence is not just sex. It can cause lifelong effects, including severe depression and anxiety. It's about somebody's body being violated, them not being in control, and no consent. So it's not just about sex. People often put it down to it's just sex and it shouldn't be harmful. And there's an Amnesty International study from the general public that also is very victim blaming. So probably between a quarter and a third of people blame the person who experiences sexual violence and blames them for what they're wearing or being out late at night. And the emphasis is always on the victim and not on the perpetrator. So we need to shine the torch on the perpetrator and his or her behaviour.
And what do the police need to do to improve the way they deal with victims of sexual offending? There's been a lot of criticism in New Zealand. We've had the Commission of Inquiry. Do you think things are improving now, or are there things that the police still need to do?
I think things are improving now, but I would say that's only in the last 18 months. There's been some quite a lot of improvement, particularly in the training. A few years ago when I was training the police, and I would ask them how many reports of sexual violence they felt or believed were to be false, I could guarantee that in a room full of police they would say that between 50% and 90% of sexual assault allegations were false. Now that was their baseline, that was where they started from. So if that's the case, they're not taking the complaint seriously. And I think the difference now is the training. So and also from the top down, there's a commitment to take sexual assault complaints seriously and give the very best support through the criminal justice system that they possibly can.
Sans, do you think that perhaps an inquisitorial system would be better than an adversarial system for dealing with sexual offences?
I think that it would probably promote some better outcomes for victims. And it would be better to look at what sort of inquisitorial system is developed. I mean, it doesn't have to be based on what we currently have here, like the family court system, but There are other systems within Europe that have developed inquisitorial approaches, and we can look within our own backyard also within Kaupapa Māori to look at what an inquisitorial approach would be, not just for a better outcome for survivors but also a better outcome for those who have been doing the harmful sexual behaviour or committing sexual violence and assault.
So what are some of the positive features that you'd like to introduce into our system?
The victim wouldn't be treated like a piece of evidence in terms that there's a requirement for her to go through the evidential, which is quite traumatic in itself, and additionally the opportunity to have a voice in an environment to write up some statements and have that voice be heard in a different way rather than through he said, she said kind of debate, which currently happens in an adversarial process where one of the other benefits is that the perpetrator would need to provide some response to those accusations, whereas currently under an adversarial system it's not required.
And what about the idea of having a specialist court for dealing with sexual offences? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it would be really good if they had a specialist court, because it would provide, you could create an area that would be specific to respond to the victim's needs. And so currently the current court houses, we've made some modifications, but still coming into it is still quite a traumatic experience for any victim. And when we think about how often your average person would engage with the justice system, it wouldn't be that often, and so it can be quite ominous going in there. So if we had specialist courts, then we could develop them in a way that would be more victim focused, survivor focused.
And what about the decision maker? Should we have juries or judges in these cases?
I think we were talking before about the general public. Now, police juries are drawn from the general public, so they'll be holding all the rape myths that women lie about rape, that it's just sex, it's not traumatic. So to have a specialist court with a specialist judge and 2 trained specialist jurors is what the Law Commission is recommending after a lot of research into New Zealand and international jurisdictions. The current adversarial process means that it is adversarial, so it's one side knocking down the other. And at the moment we have rape survivors being cross-examined by defence lawyers and being called sluts and slags and liars, and it's about knocking down their credibility and wearing them out. It's not about somebody telling their story about what happened to them. So if we had a specialist court with a judge in control of the court instead of the defence lawyers in charge of the court, which is happening at the moment, then the survivor of sexual violence has the opportunity to say what happened to her or him, and the defendant also has the opportunity to say what he or she did. And it's a much more humane process where all the accounts can be put on the table. Yeah. At the moment we've got rules of evidence which cuts out a lot of evidence for the rape survivor.
And is there a role for restorative justice in dealing with these cases? I mean, traditionally probably we've thought that maybe there wouldn't be, but what do you think about that?
Yes, traditionally there was, when restorative justice came about, there was a request from within the sector to not look at including sexual violence in its application, but a pilot has recently been run in New Zealand around accessing restorative justice, and I think that if we are able to further monitor how that might look and what the outcomes are through that, and at the same time we could look at the alternatives that even other worldviews might provide for what a restorative justice process might look at. So looking at kaupapa Māori delivery and how they reach restoration and accountability through a restorative process.
And so what would that involve? Have you got a few more details?
Engaging with, in terms of from a Māori worldview.
So that would mean engaging with both whānaus who are affected. So from a Māori world view, we wouldn't just be looking at just the individual, is it what impacts the individual will impact on the whānau in both circumstances, and then having an opportunity to identify the impact that the sexual violence has, and understanding how accountability can be achieved from the voice of the survivor, and understanding what the impact has been, so that the person who has committed the offence can take responsibility for that.
Thanks, Sands, and thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Katrina.
Now it's time for News of the Week. A Wellington woman who gave up her career to support her family has won 70% of the money in the property division following the end of her marriage. A law change 11 years ago was supposed to compensate women who sacrificed their careers for their families and often later found themselves penniless and unemployable in their 50s. But there have been few successful cases since then. When this woman re-entered the workforce after her marriage ended following her husband's 2 affairs, her taxable income for 1 year was $8,500 and for the following year $26,200. Protests in Egypt have seen sexual assault used as a way of intimidating women and preventing them from protesting. 91 women protesters were raped and sexually abused in Tahrir Square in just 4 days in July. The square has seen repeated sexual mob crime. Harass Map has now been created to show where sexual assaults are happening in Egypt. Now, here are the 5 action points from this week's episode. Introduce a separate specialist court for hearing sexual offences. Judge-alone trials for sexual offence cases. Independent sexual violence advisors should be appointed for complainants. Increase the numbers of police completing adult sexual assault training courses. Education to change male and community attitudes about rape, starting with respect for women being taught from primary school onwards. That's our program for this week. Join me next week when we'll look at why only a third of MPs in New Zealand are women. Are we really so incompetent that we can't do the job? Or so unappealing no one wants to vote for us? Or could there be other factors at play? And if you've got ideas for the WomenPower win or fail, please email them to us at info@facetv.co.nz. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.